and welcome to the panel at the Golden Door Awards, where we are discussing about how trust and respect are inspired and earned and not inherited because of some position, some title, or because you inherited it from your parents or from some predecessor. Unfortunately, in our world today, there is a huge deficit of trust, and yet a lot of people think that they are very trusted and they are very respected. You can see it in the corporate sector, you can see it in the government sector, you can see it in the education sector. And in a world where most people are very subservient, very sycophantic, and basically love to take their selfies with people who are in powerful positions, no matter how corrupt they are, without realizing that they actually compromise their own dignity and trust, and yet they think that they are very trusted. So I would be provoking some thought and generating some insight, because this is a generative dialogue. And the format of the panel is that I will pose a question to all of you, and you would have 3 minutes to respond to that question, each of you, and then I would articulate thoughts around that question. And you can respond to that question based on what you see in the sectors that you are working in or have worked in, and how does that affect the larger community and the larger mass, larger society. So my first question to all of you is, how would you define trust and respect? Because these are words which are loosely used by most people without really understanding what the concept of trust or respect is. So how would you define trust and respect, and how is it connected to self-esteem and dignity? So we'll go alphabetically. So Abraham, we will start with you.
Okay, you put me on the mat. All right. But yeah, I've been thinking about this since you shared this for the first time, and I've been kind of reflecting on what I've my experience in the army, and then later in the last few years in the business world. And I also did some reading up, and what really stood out for me was that trust, respect, and dignity together form something akin to integrity. And if you have all three, then you have integrity, and then you sort of touch upon a person's beliefs and his or her confidence in you. And I say this in the sense of my experience in the military, because as a leader, your team member, the soldiers or officers who are junior to you, trust you. What does it mean? It means that they are willing to put their lives in your hand. They believe in what you believe, and they say, okay, we agree with this, the way this person is thinking, and we will do what this person tells us to without going into the whys and hows of it, because we believe in what this person is saying. And that is, I think, that is what is trust. When you don't question every action that somebody's taking, but go with it. So the other two things, respect and dignity, they go hand in hand, because I believe that if somebody, you trust somebody and it shows that you respect them, and you also have to provide dignity to them. And I say this again in the context of soldiers or people, in the private sector, people on your team who are subordinate to you. If you respect them, you will give them work that is aligned with their capability, what you believe is their capability, and you let them do it the way they want to do it. And in turn, you beget their respect, and you give them dignity, right? And the on the other side is where you say, look, oh, I don't know if this person can do it, so I'm going to give him or her really low level work, which is way below what this beyond below what this person is capable of, and I will make this person keep doing that. um, and in turn, this person is going to feel that I have done him or her a big favor in doing it, and so that it doesn't lead to a balanced relationship, right? So three of them together, trust, respect, and dignity going together, is what leads to integrity, and that's what ultimately helps you, get your organization moving forward, aligning yourself with the goals of the organization. If of course, if the organization claims to believe in all these three things. So I've been on the military side. I'm not saying that military, everybody and the entire organization believes in all of this. It not at all. It all depends on the personalities. But as an organization, it does try to instill those values and does try to identify those values when they're selecting people to join. And it's a very important part of um, the culture and the goals of the organization, unlike in the private sector where this is not so. They just look at your skills and capabilities and experience, and you can get that job. But in the military it is not. Of course, somewhere down the line things do get diluted, but that's, I guess, something that we'll discuss further on.
Thank you, Abraham, and thank you for sharing those insights about the military and the corporate sector, because you have worked in both the sectors. And like you rightly said, just because you're in the military doesn't mean that you will be trusted and respected. We can see that with the current chief of staff for the Indian Armed Forces, General Bipin Rawat. I mean, most soldiers don't trust him. Most civilians don't trust him because of his subservient, sycophantic ways. So over to you, Aditi. What are your insights on this? To this particular question?
I'm going to take off from where Abraham left off. As a daughter of an army officer, that generation of the army certainly inspired respect, trust, and that nebulous quality of integrity which we constantly talk about. Now, I also think it's also a matter of perspective. And it's very, very personal. I may have a vision, I may have respect for a certain person, and another person may not have. So it does become a little personal at times that somebody who I see as somebody trustworthy may not be seen as trustworthy by somebody else. So what is the vision we are trying to create? How do we teach? As an educator, it's very important for me to inculcate trust in the children. And it's becoming increasingly difficult as the children live in a world where we say something else and they see something else. And that bridge is something which as a parent and as a teacher, I struggle with. So while we talk about trust, we talk about honesty, my students look at me, almost as if I'm a special child, and they say, "Ma'am, do you really believe that this happens? Do you really think the world works this way?" And it's very hard hitting for me, again, on a very personal level, to explain to the children that there are certain values which are age old, which we will live by. And frankly, trust begets trust, respect begets respect. And as a school, we try and teach these things. Sorry to say, what the children see outside is quite on the contrary. What they may hear at home could be completely different. So we are fighting a sort of a battle almost to get some thoughts across about trusting each other, about trusting a system. So again, as a school, I have always said that trust the child, trust the parent, and only then will they trust you. So if a child has said that he has not able to do something, listen to them. We have this culture of this climate of distrust all the time, that we think everybody's lying, that everybody's telling an untruth. I think that is something which is adding to this deficit which Jerry, you spoke about, the trust deficit, the respect deficit that we constantly talk about, we harp about, is almost self-propitiating, because we are unknowingly adding to it, in some way or the other. So how do we work at getting trust and giving trust? By first not being judgmental to start with. Let's not judge everybody all the time, especially children. If they live in a world which is trusting, which is loving, which is empathetic, they will learn these values. But constantly pulling down each other and whatever, unfortunately we don't have many icons left in the world, but whatever we can tell them, even if it's an imaginary one, let's live by those. For me, these are the biggest challenges, which is why, Jerry, I was very excited when you decided to chair this and moderate this session, that I've come here as a learner, as a seeker, that what do we do differently so that the children learn trust, the children learn respect, because while we say everybody's equal, at home they see a world which is not very equal. There are gender inequities, there are class inequities, and we really need to do something to bridge these gaps, to plug these holes and make the whole experience of living more wholesome.
Right, ma'am. So thank you, Aditi ma'am, and I completely agree with you that it's very important to kind of promote positivity in a very negativity world. But at the same time, it's very important to also call out people who are doing wrong, because a lot of people who are doing wrong are unfortunately projected as heroes in magazines, because nowadays you can buy magazine space. You can even buy the cover page of Time magazine today, right? So you have a Donald Trump who comes on a Time magazine. You have a Narendra Modi who comes on a Time magazine as trustworthy leaders. And then people are wondering, how are they trustworthy? Because here are people who are scamming all through. Right. And that's what like children ask you in school. When I do leadership courses and workshops in colleges and B schools, the students ask me that, sir, you're teaching us ethics and values. And over here, everybody who is doing fraud and no one gets caught. They're in fact scot-free, living in some tax havens or in London, and they've escaped, and no one's pursuing the case. And I say, don't worry about them. You think about yourself. Ask yourself one question. If you can't work from the moral code, work from the consequences. Ask yourself one question. When you do something wrong, what will happen when you get caught? Not if you get caught, when you get caught,
When
because
you
that stigma is what not only you, but your entire family and future generations will have to live with. We have Rajat Gupta as a classic example of this, and yet the man is hailed as a hero all over. Rajat Gupta is the first Indian who was the global MD of a firm called McKinsey and Company, and now more popular as the fraud and the insider trader of Goldman Sachs. So with that, over to you, Itu. What are your thoughts on this particular question?
Thank you so much. And the initiation by Colonel Cherian and Aditi, I resonate with both of you because I've been an educator for almost 20 years and lived as an army wife and as an army person, from the family of third generation of army. So I very innately resonate with this word. And I also feel there is a word in Hindi called sutradhar, which means the thread that runs through. And I feel that trust runs through every relationship, every genre of life, and everything that you adorn yourself, be a teacher, be a mother, be a father, anything that you do, you adorn trust and you exhibit trust and you live trust. Only then you beget trust, as Aditi ji was saying. And as the word trust comes from the word truth, which means faithfulness, constancy, and consistency. So trust has to be lived constantly and consistently. It cannot be lived a day and then removed for one day and come back to it. So I personally feel that it's a trusteeship and responsibility that you take onto your shoulders as whatever work that you're doing, be it in the corporate, be it as a teacher, be it as a parent, be it as anyone that you are in your life, in your day to day, you have to work with that trusteeship, with that responsibility, and firm belief that you're taking it forward because that's how others are looking at you and imbibing it and also walking the line. The dignity and respect come hand in hand along with it because when you live it, you also get respect because you don't have to ask for it. You get it through your work. So you walk it. And when you trust yourself, the truster also trusts you. So the self-respect goes higher and higher. And I have seen that in all the areas of work that I have, that you have to also, with trust, put a lot of love into it. And when you put love into what you do, then the world will love what they see you doing.
Thank you, Itu. And I'm very happy that you brought the aspect of love into this, because trust and respect is what is the foundation of any relationship. And like I always say, the love flies out of the window one day, but what keeps the relationship intact is the trust more than even the respect. And if the trust is not there, the relationship is not solid, it's very shallow. So thank you for bringing that insight into the room. And our next speaker is Mark Parkinson. And I would like Mark and Michael to also focus on the insights around self-esteem, because the other three speakers have not spoken about self-esteem. How is trust and respect related to self-esteem and dignity? That was the question. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Cherry, and thanks, Etu. Yeah, I was also particularly interested there in what you were saying about love, because ultimately, whether we're talking, whether the words we're using are trust or truth or respect or self-dignity, it's all about relationships, and it's all about how human beings interact on this ever more crowded planet with 7.5 billion people or whatever it is. And how do we find the ways that those 7.5 billion people
we lost you for a moment there, Mark.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't know.
Before 7.5 billion.
Everything before 7.5 billion. Oh, that's a shame.
Okay.
Starting from where? Okay. No, I think what I was alluding to was that everything that we're talking about, whether we're using words like trust or truth or integrity, it's all about, as Etu said, relationships, and it's about the ability for 7.5 billion people to maintain the relationships that are fair, reasonable, equitable, and that enable all to fulfill their potential on this little round blob of soil floating through space. I have a background that's obviously in both business and education. And drawing on business, I've been kind of interested in recent years that we've seen lots and lots of references to how modern management and leadership has taken its lead from leadership gurus back in the 1980s, particularly, and as perhaps the oldest, or close to being the oldest on the panel. It's rather a shame to me, because when we go back to the 80s, people tend to think always of leadership gurus like Jack Welch, Neutron Jack, and the whole idea that nuke 10% of the employees every year because they were underperformers and get fresh blood in and all those kind of things. And it's rather sad, because I'd love to see far more attention paid to another 1980s writer and the writer of a book that had a massive impact on me and a massive impact on a lot of people at the time. Little book, it was only about 130 pages, by a man named Jan Carlson, who wrote this book called Moments of Truth. And obviously, as Edu has alluded, trust and truth have similar origins. And he'd taken over the leadership of an airline, which had like the lowest ratings in the whole of Europe. They had an awful market reputation. Their business was doing very badly, lots of red ink. They were in a terrible state. And when he took over, he needed to take some drastic and firm actions. And one of the things that he did quite early on was he pulled all his engineers together for a big meeting, all the engineers for that airline. And he said to them, whether you like it or not, a coffee stain ring on the drop-down table means to our customer that we don't maintain our engines properly and our planes are probably going to fall out of the sky. The engineers were outraged. They furious. They're up in arms. How dare you? That's their responsibility over there, not ours over here. We take pride in our work. We're very careful in what we do. And he said, don't care. Don't care, and nor does the customer. As an entity, as an organization, the trust is not there. And the moment of truth, when that passenger sat down and dropped the table down and expected it to be clean, means that you should care whether the drop-down table is clean, not just say it's somebody else's responsibility. And to my mind, that encapsulates a lot of what's important about how organizations get trust and maintain trust. Moving to the field of education, I think this is something that we've not been good at, and too many schools haven't been good at it, partly because the motives and the intent have not always been good. I'm never going to forget the day when I was walking through a school on a guided tour, and walking behind me, not realizing I was earwigging on their conversation, was the owner of a chain of schools, who was proudly telling the person walking next to them, oh, we've got it all sussed. We know how to build successful schools and get lots of people in, get lots of parents. You build a big fancy reception area, and you give the principal a big desk in a fancy office, and the parents are putty in your hands, all sorted. Now, we're all smiling and we're nodding. The reality is, though, that we all know schools like that, and we all know schools where exactly that has been the intent. And some of them, for a while, are able to fool the public into believing that that means that somehow they must be something impressive. But the question that I would ask, and that I think would always be at the root for me, is where will those schools be? Where will those school owners and those school leaders be in 30, 40, 50, 60 years? Will their legacies survive? And I would argue that ultimately they won't, because the lack of trust and the lack of dignity and the lack of truth will undermine them eventually.
Thank you, Mark. And those are some brilliant insights. And thank you for sharing that story. And I think to sum up the insight, the big core insight from that story, it's the little things that make the big difference, which most people don't realize. So while you can project yourself in a Time magazine, and then you tell some half truths and lies, the trust is gone and the respect will never be there. And I think it's that insight from that story. It's the little things that make the big difference. And with what you spoke about related to the school owner who was talking about those fancy receptions, I've had this dilemma myself, even setting up something called the Public Health Foundation of India, where I was part of the founding team. And every time these people would use the word world class, I realized that they were talking about the infrastructure and the look of the building, the architecture, the air conditioning, the luxury and the luxurious spaces that the building would offer. And I said, that's not what world-class education is all about. World-class education is the content, it's the subject matter. If that's not world-class, the building is useless, it's futile. And I think there's a catch-22 over here, because most parents nowadays choose schools and select schools for their children based on the infrastructure and the luxurious spaces that the school offers. So it's a what comes first, a chicken or an egg situation. So with that, we'll move over to Chef Michael Swami. Chef Michael Swami, looking forward to your thoughts and insights. And I would like you to also speak about the concept of self-esteem and dignity. Over to you, Michael.
Hi, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. I started out as a very young chef a couple of decades ago, when being in the kitchen was like in the military, where someone gave an order, you just followed it. And I realized that didn't build trust in your staff or your cooks. So when I became a chef and started leading restaurants and setting up restaurants, I decided to lead by example. If I cooked, I cleaned up the table behind me. If I even washed the pots and pans, even as a senior chef. I still do it today. And what happens is we are in a world where every chef or every cook wants an assistant. And when in the UK or the US, to have an assistant means $10 an hour for paying them. And that is money. And when you start looking at it from that angle, you start leading by example. When if I've just eat something, I clean it myself. And that is where I believe the fundamental of trust comes in. And again, when you're with your cooks, you're kind of living with them, you're kind of working with them. And I can see that entrepreneurs, owners would never sit down and explain to them. This example is happening today when salaries are being cut. Nobody is really sitting down and explaining to them the economics of running a restaurant or the economics of running a kitchen. And that is where the trust factor comes in, when you sit and really explain it to them as to why their salaries are being cut and what are the trying to build a brand. And self-esteem, coming back to self-esteem, it's times like this when your self-esteem comes at its lowest. And I feel that in schools, we don't teach our children about self-esteem. In school, I always had this thing written on my chef's hat, simply the best, and my classmates used to laugh about it. But it's a motto you live by. You have colleges which have a motto. You have schools which have a motto. But are our students following that motto? Are our students living by that motto? And we can't always blame the teachers. The parents have to also inculcate that kind of, I won't say lifestyle, but the parents also have to inculcate that habit of grooming our kids. And that is where I find education is lacking. We are so busy about maths, physics, everything. But teaching them the very basics is what is lacking. And that is where self-esteem and a person's integrity comes to the fore. Yeah. So
Thank you, Michael. Excellent insights. And I completely agree with you that in school, we teach them everything related to academic subjects, but we don't teach them the most essential life skills of the future. And that is what think tanks have, research done by think tanks the world over has shown. And the most essential skills of the future are learning to learn empathy, emotional intelligence, self-esteem, because there's clearly a huge deficit of self-esteem around the world. You will see it on social media. Today, you have young women, young men, old men posting some funny kind of videos on reels, whether it's on, I'm not on Instagram, but I see it on Facebook, and I keep blocking it, and I still those videos keep coming up. And I'm not being judgmental, but why would you do that? For a few likes, for a few views? What's wrong with you? And very vulgar, obscene dances. Yeah. So what's really happening? Is it just a outcry for attention? And that clearly shows you that the validation is not coming from within, because you're seeking validation from outside. The concept is called self-esteem, which means the validation should come from within. I don't even need simply the best to be put on my hat. I am simply the best. It's a feeling. The word you were looking for Michael, was mindset, not lifestyle. Parents, educators, schools,
yeah,
homes teach children to get a great lifestyle, but they don't teach children to get the right mindset, because we are mostly educated to develop a fixed mindset, not a growth mindset. And therein lies the concerns of how the next generation is going to kind of shape up. And with that, I would like to now introduce the panel to the audience. So that is the panel. It was a very difficult task to put this panel together, because we're talking about a very deep subject, which is about trust, respect, which is related to dignity and self-esteem. And we needed to have the right people on the panel, because you don't want people who don't embody these values to be on this panel. And that's how we chose some of our dear friends and Karmavir Puraskar Award recipients, Karmavir Chakra Award recipients, people who are part of our Rex Karmavir Global Fellowship. And starting with Abraham, who's formerly from the army, retired as a colonel, and now has been working in the corporate sector, embodies trust and respect and integrity in what he does, and speaks his mind out, is I think that's another very important thing, which basically inspires trust and respect. That do you stand up and speak out, or are you mostly indifferent about issues that are plaguing our world? And I think all the people in this panel stand up and speak out. So that's Colonel Ibrahim Cherian for you, for the audience. Then you have Aditi Mishra, who's an educator, and somehow all of them have some kind of relations with the Indian Armed Forces. And I'm very happy about that, because I always say that, when everything goes wrong, whether it's a man-made disaster or a natural disaster, the only institution that you can rely on in a country called India are the armed forces. So that's Aditi Mishra. She's an educator, she's a director and the principal of a school, and also runs a school for the children from the unserved and underserved communities in her own time, in her own space, with her own efforts and her own investment. And that's Aditi Mishra for you. Ituvil Chopra, who's a co-founder at the Rex Karmavir Global Fellowship and Rex Ideas for Action. And she's been a teacher, she's now a therapist, does a lot of work in the healing space, and is also leading the entire Rex Karmavir Global Fellowship mission. You have Mark Parkinson, old friend, has been an investment banker, has also been a consultant to an author called Roald Dahl, who most of you would relate with because people from 7 to 70 have read books by Roald Dahl, and is now an educator and more than an educator, is an education reformer. Stands up for what he believes in, speaks his mind, even at the peril of being at the receiving end of speaking his mind. Has um, has I always say that, you know, Mark Parkinson and his journey as an educator has gone from the frying pan to the fire, into the fire, and then into the flames of hell itself, and then is still trying to find his footing about how do you kind of balance that in a world where education is treated more like a business than as a service to kind of to develop better human beings, better citizens of the world. And then, of course, you have Chef Michael Swami. Chef Michael Swami is also co-founder in the Rex Karmavir Global Hospitality Heroes Fellowship that we have created. And Michael is the founding curator and creator of the MasterChef India. Has suffered because of his penchant to take a stand and speak his mind out, and stands for what he believes in, has huge integrity. So that's the panel for you, for all the people in the audience, and thank you for joining in, and thank you for all the comments that you've been posting. So to articulate the responses to the first question, which is how would you define trust and respect? Start with trust. Trust is a manifestation of character and competence. That is what research around trust shows you. Character is about integrity, which is a congruence of humility, honesty, and courage, right? And intent, that do you have the right intent with what you're doing, or do you have some hidden agendas? So that's what character is all about. And competence is about our capacity, our capabilities, and the results that we produce, not yesterday, but the results that we produce today, tomorrow, and every day of our life. And that's what trust is a manifestation of. And what research shows you is that it is not your talent, competence, certificates, degrees, or you know, percentage and performance in school that takes you places and beyond. It is your character that takes you places and beyond. And unfortunately, in most educational institutions, we don't have character rooted education. So that is what trust is all about. Respect is about how you conduct yourself, not just in public, but when no one is watching. Because whether you like it or not, what you do in one space is observed by people in another space. So you can say something, and duplicity is something that Aditi spoke about earlier. You cannot say something and then do something which is contrary, because people know exactly who you are. Who you are and what you do speaks louder than what you say. Never forget that. So action speaks louder than words. So that is what respect is all about. And how is it related? It is related because dignity, like we were explained in the Mojo's Inspirator book, dignity is about respecting yourself. And the very simplicity of dignity is that if you truly respect yourself, you would think twice before doing anything wrong, before doing anything which is fraudulent, before doing anything which is misleading, before doing anything which is untruthful. Because when you do that, you have lost respect for yourself, and that's the demolition of dignity. And that's exactly what ripples out. How do you conduct yourself when no one is watching? And it's related to self-esteem, and there's a huge deficit of self-esteem in the world, and that is why people are always looking for validation from outside rather than understanding what validation from within means. And that is why people take so many selfies, including with corrupt politicians, corrupt celebrities, corrupt business leaders, and they'll proudly put it on their Facebook walls, right? And people are watching, so people know exactly who you are. What are you telling people when you pose for a photo with a corrupt celebrity, business leader, or a politician? That you're as good as them. So be careful about what you're doing. And research shows you that people who take too many selfies have basic self-esteem problems. So there is a huge self-esteem deficit in the world. So that's the articulation of the responses to the first question. And of course, everyone's been speaking about how we need to lead by example. And that's why in most of my leadership workshops and talks, I always say great parents make great leaders. And the problem of the world is that very few great parents, loving parents are many, great parents very few. Because great parenting is not about telling children what to do. It's about living what children need to do, which means you need to lead by example. So with that, I'll move on to the next question. And I've spoken about how there's huge subserviency, psychophancy in the world. You can see it all around us. You can see it in the political circles. You can see it in the corporate circles. And the corporate circles probably are designed like that because of the hierarchy, etc. Because, you know, you have to kind of suck up to your bosses, failing which you will have problems at appraisal time. And like I always tell my friends in the corporate sector when I'm doing workshops in the in MNCs, that what you think is trust and respect is purely fear of appraisal. It's not trust and respect at all. Remove the chair, remove the title, and if people still trust you and respect you, then I will say, yes, people trust you and respect you. So that's the corporate sector for you. But you will see the same subserviency and psychophancy which has come into the education sector. And you will see education leaders, including school owners, principals, directors, being subservient to some corrupt politician who has been invited to their school. Now, I understand that you have to invite that politician because he's the Minister of Education by default, but you don't need to be subservient and sycophantic with him. You need to conduct yourself with dignity. So you're seeing subserviency has seeped into all the spaces. And now the bigger problem over there is that when you're doing that with some corrupt politicians, the children, the students are watching you. And they will say, okay, this is the way of life. So we are sending out the wrong messages because leadership is not about telling, like we've said earlier. Leadership is about actions and what you do. So my question to you is that in a world full of subserviency and sycophancy, dignity is a huge deficit. What are your thoughts on this? And you can be for the motion or against the motion, right? Starting with Michael this time.
On mute.
Michael. You're on mute, Michael.
In a bit of a spot here, because the way the hospitality industry works is you're put in a spot.
Michael, we can't hear you. Do you want to just adjust your bandwidth or maybe change your Wi-Fi? We'll come back to you. We'll move over to Mark Parkinson.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry.
Just a minute, Mark. Michael, if you want to log in from another Wi-Fi, please check because your bandwidth is really lagging. Yeah, the Wi-Fi is lagging. Okay, we'll come back to you, Michael. All right, Mark.
Yeah, Jerry. Interesting just now that you were talking about parenting as well as aspects in education. I was trying to remember exactly when it was. It was around 15 years ago. I was very fortunate when I was based in India to spend a long weekend in, if I remember rightly, it was in Pune, attending a workshop with an American professor, a lady who'd come over from the US and was doing a number of workshops on restorative justice and restorative practices. And she was somebody who had worked directly in the setting up of the restorative justice processes in Rwanda after the Rwandan genocide. And it was a fascinating weekend to be meeting her, to be interacting with her, to be hearing about the real experiences she had there on the ground. And, you know, I mean, what we have to remember when you're dealing with something like that is here was a situation where people committed atrocities that you know would shock and horrify any normal human being. And you know, we've seen similar in the way restorative justice and restorative practices have been used in South Africa, for example, in terms of dealing with the remnants and the hangovers from apartheid. But in all these situations, you know, the fact that you're having a starting point that says, if we have a system and a process that simply says, call out a wrongdoer and punish them, actually what we do is we teach wrongdoers not that doing wrong is wrong, but that getting caught is wrong. And so we don't actually make progress when it comes to those issues of people connecting doing right and dignity and integrity. And I think one of the really exciting things that I'm finding these days is that this has been translated into a set of approaches that are being used in schools, and obviously are also available for parents to use in terms of families and bringing up children. And to me, that is really fascinating. I mean, you know, we have so much of our education system, and even I think our you know, published materials on parenting that have their origins in a Catholic-influenced Judeo-Christian background, which, for example, suggests that all children are born of original sin, and that basically, you know, that the child is innately sinful, and that part of the process of parenting is about taking the sin out of the child. Something like restorative practice and restorative justice comes from a very, very different angle. And it's been a really interesting experience for me, actually, since I came here to Cambodia, because the school group that I've come here to lead has restorative practices as one of the cornerstones of its student support services and its approaches to discipline and behavior and those sorts of things in the school. So it's a really interesting and fascinating experience. You know, instead of when wrongdoing has happened, when somebody has stepped across a line which is unacceptable to the community, instead of just buying into that and saying, you know, and saying, right, this individual has done wrong, this is a broken individual, they must be punished, they must be repaired. Instead, you come at it from an angle of reflection and understanding what has been done, who has been hurt, who has been harmed, and in what way. What do I need to do to undo that harm and that damage? You know, and I think that also ties to your comment earlier, Jerry, about the calling out of wrongdoers in society. Whether you'd be ready to buy into the fact that, you know, some of these corrupt politicians, instead of being punished and thrown behind bars and the keys thrown away, as you might wish, that instead we'd be engaging them in restorative circles, during which they are asked to reflect on the victims and the outcomes of their deeds. But I think, you know, a changed future starts with the children, and therefore I'm very keen and excited about how we can explore further this use of restorative practices to bring about different aspects, different perspectives for the younger generations.
Right. And thank you, Mark. Thank you for, you know, provoking those thoughts around restorative justice. Very important. And I think one of the sectors which I forgot to mention earlier, where subserviency and sycophancy has seeped in, and probably seeped into the very core, is the UN. The United Nations organization. And when you were speaking about restorative justice, it reminded me of a movie called The Whistleblower, which was released in 2011. And it's based on the life of Catherine Bolkowicz, who was a police officer from Nebraska who volunteered to serve in Bosnia as a part of the UN peacekeeping corps. And she realized over there that UN workers and UN volunteers and UN officers were actually exploiting, raping, molesting, harassing women. And she took a stand against it. And she became persona non grata. So there you are. You take a stand, you blow the whistle. The movie is called The Whistleblower, released in 2011. If you've not watched it, I would urge you to watch it. And she's officially persona non grata today. So she's never ever got a job after that, either in the UN or in any international NGO. Now, that's the fourth sector for you. I've blown the whistle myself in an organization called ActionAid, and I was victimized for doing that till I blew the whistle in Time magazine in 2010, and then the entire international aid sector, you know, came under the scanner. But I completely agree with you that if people who are serving in spaces where they have to work for restorative justice have no clue about what justice truly means, then how will it work? You could see this with the entire Me Too movement. It failed because where was the justice for all the women who called out people? In India, you had people who were called out by multiple women, and yet the narrative is that where were they legally sued, or where has the law taken any action against them? So if the law has not taken any action against them, they are right. The women were all wrong. So you have 25, 30 women who called out people, and those men are walking the road scot-free. So that's justice for you. So with that, thank you, Mark, for provoking those insights. With that, I move on to Michael. Michael, what are your thoughts on this? We can't hear you, Michael, still.
Is it better?
Yes, but still very
Hello?
faint. That's what the people in the audience also saying. Okay, so Michael, will come back to you. We'll come back to you. Over to you, Itu. What are your thoughts on this? In a world full of subserviency and sycophants, dignity is a huge deficit. For or against the motion?
I'm for the motion. Yes, it is very, very true. And we've seen it, lived it, and living it at this point of time as we speak, the world that we are in, the world that we have created, and the world that is what it is. And I'd like to go back to the word swabhiman. The word in Hindi, swabhiman, comes, and it's very close to self-esteem, but it means dignity. So self-esteem, dignity, and swabhiman means, swa means me, and abhiman means pride in myself, dignity in what I do and dignity in what I create. So the world that we are in, and as any role that we play in it, as a parent, as a teacher, as a team leader, as a member of the corporate, as a member of non-for-profit, or as a human being, what we need to do is take a bit of risk to stand up for the wrong. And if you have self-esteem, and if you have dignity, and if you trust yourself and respect yourself enough, you will take that daring risk to stand up against the wrong, not fearing what the consequences would be, because the consequences will be whatever it will be, but you will stand an example in sands of time that you did it for not just yourself, but also for others, to take a cue and to stand up and to dare and risk and be courageous enough. So it's a very wonderful temperature that we need to maintain. It's a temperature that we always need to consistently and constantly maintain, to be able to speak up, so that we do not practice subserviency, so that we don't become subservient, and so that we also don't bribe in any form, literally or metaphorically, towards sycophancy in our lives, in our actions, in our doings, in our living. It's a hard task. It's a tough road, as Jerry has said, that you blew a whistle while being in the top position in an organization. It took a lot of diligence. It took a lot of learning. It took a lot of courage to even do that. And that example I'm taking to talk about it, but there are a lot of other examples where people who called out have been subjected to a lot of problems, who have been subjected to a lot of things. But what they stand out for is an example, a daring example for others to follow the pursuit and not leave the path of courage, and not to stop risking, because that's the only way you can create a better world, not for yourself, but also for your children, for next generations, and make the world a better place. I'd like to leave it on that.
Thank you, Itu. And I am very happy that you brought in that insight about the word Swabhiman, very powerful Indian word, Hindi word. And I don't think there is any word in English which is strong enough to kind of unpack the meaning of Swabhiman. And I think Swabhiman says it all. It's about the way you conduct yourself. It's about the way you carry yourself. It's about the way you hold dignity in a very high space for yourself. And like I said, if you really believe in dignity, you would think twice before doing anything wrong and not succumb to temptation. Because the moment you do something which is wrong, whether it is being dishonest or whether it's about doing something fraudulent or even doing something which is not right, then you know that lowered your dignity and in turn lowered your self-esteem, because that's exactly how it works. They're all connected. So thank you, Itu, for that. We'll move now to our Aditi. Aditi, what are your thoughts on this? Are you for or against the motion?
I'm absolutely with you on this, Jerry, Itu. In fact, Itu's used a word which I'm very fond of when I talk to children, the swabhiman, the idea of swabhiman, of being proud of who you are, as opposed to ahankar. Ahankar is egoist. Swabhiman,
Arrogance.
with a person with swabhiman is somebody with character who can say no for something wrong. And I'd like to talk about a couple of things where we are headed as a people, as educators, as Indians, as adults in a living world. All magazines, you spoke about it, Jerry, that magazine covers are up for grabs. We are sent mails at least 4 times a year that pay this much and come on the cover as the 50 best educators or the 100 most influential human beings on earth. And I have consistently said no to these because you don't buy space in covers. And to be honest, I'm asked by parents, by children, by my alumni, ma'am, why are you not here? Are you not among the 50 most influential educators? I said, apparently I'm not, because I'm not going to pay a lakh of rupees for this. I'd rather spend that lakh in buying 10 laptops for my students or tablets for my students in the Shiksha Kendra. It's very simple. It's difficult for some, perhaps, but I have always taken pride in saying no to something which is wrong. Another interesting take I'll give you: during the Commonwealth Games, there was a certain minister who was called by every school. I mean, if there was a school, he was called to be part of the assembly or a big function. And I was asked by somebody very senior to call him. And I was a very new principal. I was a young principal with non-white hair. So it took all my courage to say, excuse me, sir, I'd rather not. So my senior almost fell off his chair. He says, why? Everybody's calling him. I said, no, I've read things about him which are not very palatable. And he's not the kind of role model I want to call in front of the children. And I blessed myself and the powers that helped me to say this no while my knees were shaking with fear. Because 2 months later, the same person was behind bars. And all the children who had received awards from him were busy cutting out pictures and cutting his photo out. Now, that is something which I spoke about in an assembly. I told the children, who is a role model? Someone you aspire to be like. What is dignity? It is how you feel about yourself. How comfortable are you being you? You are not the car you drive. You are not the address you live in. You are the person who is doing some good. So, for example, the motto of my school, one of you mentioned the motto of a school and how we don't live by that. Our school motto is service before self. And it is reminded to every child, every parent, every teacher, all the time through everything that we do. So that is how you live a motto. How do you translate this for the children? So what I have tried to start doing in the past decade or so, the children choose their own who's going to be a guest at a particular function. And it gives me a lot of pleasure that sometimes we've picked out our own students who are doing great work in community service. We picked out parents who are doing some wonderful work, unknown work, because, the way the world is, we are glamorizing glamour. So if you're a pretty face who's won a Miss whatever contest, you are there on a cover. But if you are somebody who's running a school for the underprivileged, you're a nobody. But if that same person shouts at a parent or kicks out somebody, then she'll be in the news. So we are looking at negativity. We are feeding negativity. Newspapers are looking for what story is there. Is there a story to catch? When that unfortunate incident happened, for example, Jerry, in Gurgaon, in a school where a child was killed inside the school premises, the news hounds were everywhere, wanting a story. And anybody who said that it is a very tragic incident, but let's not make a story out of it. Let's be a little respectful to what has happened. those stories were not carried forward. I mean, they wanted the shore to happen, the whole noise to take place. So how do we tell our children to be good, not for something, not for a gain, but be good for the sake of being good? That message has to go across very, very, very strongly, and do good, not just for yourself, but for the community, because that is what is going to be remembered. Especially in the last year, when we've seen people going away because of COVID. What has remained? What is the legacy? Is what they have left behind by way of their work for the less privileged. That has been my message right through. And honestly, the trappings of the so-called glamour and cover pages and being in the newspaper is something we all need to raise our voice against and stop immediately.
Thank you, Aditi ma'am. Brilliant insights. And the one core insight I take from that entire response of yours is service before the self. Because if no matter what profession or vocation you are in, you are here to serve. And like I always say, that you are not entitled to any trust or respect or dignity or self-esteem because you got some fancy education or you come from a so-called privileged class. You have to earn your place in the sun, no matter who you are. There is Talula who's posted about how to get the privileged kids to kind of mix around with the kids who are from the kids who have less. The kids don't have less. The world has ensured that they have less. It's not that the kids have less, and those kids are unserved and underserved. And I don't think we should even go from that mindset of getting kids from the privileged classes to mix with them. No, the privileged classes should know that the kids out there have much more talent and much more competence maybe than them, but they don't have the opportunity. So we should teach them to be grateful. We have to teach them the attitude of gratitude, which a lot of kids who go to expensive schools and colleges don't have nowadays, because that entitlement is another big problem of the world. So over to you, Michael. What are your thoughts on this? Michael, you're on mute. Michael, we can't hear you.
It's now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Thoughts on this are quite mixed actually, because several reasons. One is so ingrained in us.
Michael, sorry, my friend, you are fading in and fading out. You want to do it without your headphones? Just speak into the device.
Now?
Yes.
Okay.
Now you're being devious.
Devious? Okay.
All right, go ahead.
So my thoughts on this are quite varied actually, because you have religion, politics, the way we are brought up, all dictating that we have to be subservient.
Right.
And to break out of that mold takes a very different kind of energy.
Right.
Which I think people need to be taught.
Right.
You need to teach them by example. You need to teach them by literally forcing them to speak out.
Right.
I was a very shy kid, and I think it was only when I saw people trying to bring me down, people trying to push you under,
right,
own manipulative ways, that you said, you started to learn to say no. We are not taught to say no. We are always being taught to say yes to everything. And I think it's only recent years that I've started to say no.
Right.
Because I think it's time that we have to stop being subservient.
Very nice.
And I work with a lot of people and resorts in villages, small towns, where even the cooks, the waiters, they're always kind of half bowing to you, half, yes, sir, Haji, that kind of stuff. And
the yes man of the world, yeah.
Yes man of the world. And when I went to Lucknow a couple of decades ago, I was taught a very simple thing. The word Haji, and the word up. In Bombay, we always say tu for everything, to every person. And it was a cook who refused to answer me till I said, "Aap kya kar rahe ho?" You know, and that's when you start to learn that they are one with you.
Very nice.
Yeah. And so when like you were saying earlier that, the privileged lot have to earn their spot in the sun. And I think that's very true. When we start giving those junior to us their spot in the sun is when we start learning a lot too. Because definitely they are very talented, they're very brilliant singers, brilliant sports people, and we have to give them where credit is due. And put them on the cover of magazines, put them on the front page. Instead of taking a selfie, talk about them, take a picture of them and talk about them. Talk about the taxi driver, talk about the farmer, and that's when they start seeing their own importance. And I think that's very important in today's day and age.
Thank you, Michael. Some brilliant insights there. And I completely love that story of that cook from Lucknow, because, no matter, dignity is not a manifestation of wealth and power. Dignity is all about how you carry yourself and how you respect yourself. And if you don't respect yourself, you can never have others respecting you. It's not about the projection that you do, the masks that you wear, because that actually kind of is a counter to trust and respect. And to just clarify about what religions and most education systems teach, I don't think that religions or education systems teach subserviency. They teach humility. But unfortunately, most people don't know what the concept of humility is. So they think humility is about giving respect to wealth, status, power, positions, some kind of title. But they don't understand that humility is about giving equal and same respect to each and every human being, be it the minister, be it the janitor, be it the teacher, be it the waiter, be it the priest, be it the person who's serving as an office assistant, be it the driver, be it the taxi driver. So if you're not giving equal and same respect to each and all, you are not humble. And most people think they are humble, but the human being cannot be humble because our DNA is embedded with arrogance, ahankar, like Aditi was saying. So you have to practice humility on a day-to-day basis, which means learn to give equal and same respect to each and every human being, be it the minister, the king, or the clerk who's serving at the front office, right? If you're not doing that, you are not humble. Now, this is very important for us because at the Rex Karmavir Global Fellowship Mission, you would see that in our Rex and Karmavir events, we actually send this message out very clearly. Don't expect any VIP treatment. And I'm very happy, and I'm sure Mark, Itu, and Aditi, who are also now co-founders in the mission, would agree with this. Abraham has been to one of our events. We treat each and every human being with equal and same respect. You could be a slum dweller, you could be a sex worker, you could be a princess or a prince of Wales. They've all been into our forums. Don't expect any VIP treatment. You are as important as the other person. So there is no chief guest. There is no VIP that this person is the highlight of the event. No, everyone is the highlight of the event. You are all here because you are champions of change. You are our Karmaveers, and we treat each and all of you with equal and same respect. We've embodied the spirit right from the beginning, right from the inception, when we started conceptualizing the awards way back in 2003, 2004, and till date, we've not compromised it. So we've had several ministers, and they all look for that attention, but we like, you're just one of us, right? You know, cat's whiskers. Learn to be humble. Leave your position and title on the doormat before you enter the event, right? So I think that it all depends on how you practice it. And thank you for bringing those insights into the room. Over to you, Abraham.
Yeah,
for or against the motion?
Oh, well, I'm for the motion, absolutely. And I just go back to what Aditi ji said, service before self is the motto for school. And that's also the motto of NDA, National Defense Academy. And it's actually Seva Parmo Dharma, right? So, and that's something that I just want to kind of talk about. An example from the army, and this relates to basically how subserviency and psychophancy sort of, connects with our perception of our capabilities and our competence and our status in this world, right? And and in very, very short terms, that if I'm not competent, or I don't think I'm competent, or I'm not high enough on the ladder, then I need to be subservient to make up for it, and that's the kind of culture that possibly we promote in India. And I'll give an example. I just taken over my regiment. We were in Jammu and Kashmir, line of control, difficult times. And I went to inspect I'd gone back to my own regiment after 10 years. So I went to inspect the regiment, after taking over. Went to the gun park where we have these artillery guns, and there was an NCO standing there. He gave me a very nice salute, fantastic salute, great. And so I said, okay, can you dismantle the breech block of the gun? And he gave me that look, which said, look, I don't know how to do it. And he's supposed to be qualified to take that out, during war, when he's firing the gun, maintain it and put it back and continue firing. He couldn't do it. So I realized that people are, they are qualified on paper. They have all the right skills for their promotions, but they don't know their work. And how they get it is because they're subservient and they make the boss happy, and they get that it's called the grade, and they get a pay increase, and they keep moving on because they've got that certificate that says I'm grade 1 and I get the pay. So now my problem as a commanding officer is that if this guy can't do it and there's a war, I'm the one who's answerable. The regiment is answerable. It's not acceptable to me. So I went back and said, all these havaldars, they're sergeant, the equivalent. I said, all of them will go through retraining and testing. Anybody who doesn't pass is going to be made to go through all of those training sequences which they have to go through, and only then they become eligible for promotion. So the troops look at it not as retraining. They say, my salary has been reduced, right? My grade pay has been reduced, and they wrote to the army commander, the chief, and and so one of the senior generals lands up in my regiment, and they say, look, and this is the time when there were suicides and there was a mutiny in one of the units, and so everybody is worried that, look, you're doing something wrong. These people are writing that there's something wrong, and they land up. And so I said, look, you expect me to be deploy for war in 6 hours time, my regiment. That's the that's the goal that's been given to my regiment. But with this state of training, I cannot. And if I don't take some tough measures, and this is tough love that I think, Jerry, we talked about, when we met in Bangalore some time ago. If I don't do this, my regiment is going to be unfit for war. And unfit for war is a phrase that every commanding officer in the Indian Army is really scared of, because if somebody says your regiment is unfit for war, it's like, it's the worst that somebody can say for you. So I said, look, and I told this general who came, I said, I have to do these tough things. People will not like it because they are in their comfort zone. I got to push them out of that. If you think that I'm doing something wrong, you feel free to remove me from command. I'm okay. Please do that. But if you think I'm doing something right, I expect you to support me. And I think that's the good thing about the Indian Army. I'm convinced that it may seem very bureaucratic and stuff like that, but in the end, people come out and support you if you do the right thing. And he did. He said, okay, Abraham, just go ahead. What you're doing is right. It's difficult, but do what you have to. So that's one. And why did this thing happen? Because people compensate for their own perception of their competence and their status by being subservient and say, look, I'll give you a great salute. I cannot dismantle the breach. Please understand, be happy for my salute. Don't look at my breach, that the work that I have to do. Don't look at that. So my goal was bring that dignity back into that NCO's, personality, to say, look, be proud of the work that you have to do and your competence. And then I don't care about your salute. I don't care whether you're wearing the, the creased uniform or not. If you know your work, that's good enough. So that's one. The second, very recent, after I left the army, private company, and you have this appraisal coming in and everybody wants a 5 on 5. And so people on my team, they said, expecting 5. And I said, look, you need to upskill yourself on product management. And this, I'm bringing this out because just a couple of days ago, this person whom I had this conversation with, she called me up and said that I'm getting promoted because of what you did. So that upskill yourself, improve your capabilities, and then you don't have to be subservient to anyone. You have your pride in yourself, right? And then you don't worry about your appraisal, you'll get it. And
nice.
so push for that, got it. And then this person calls up 1 year after I left that organization, says that, look, I'm getting promoted because of what you discussed with us that day, and what we pushed us to do. So I think that's how dignity and subservience and psychophancy is related. And as leaders, I think it's a very important part of our remit to kind of encourage people to get out of that subservience through improving your own capabilities, right? And that's very important.
Thank you, Abraham. And that's a great story about the NCO. For the audience, do you want to tell what NCO stands for?
Yeah, NCO, non-commissioned officer. So you have a corporal and a sergeant, and
right. And I find so much insight and connection in that one story, even to parents and educators and people all over, because the entire concept is that we'll make life so miserable for you in the training that you will survive the war. So you grill them, you drill them, you put them to the mill so that they can live in the war, they come back alive, right? And that's what parents and educators need to realize, because I'm working with several students as a coach today. I've realized that many students, because of the pressure of their parents and the schools, which also focus on percentage and not on the potential of the child, have actually kind of downloaded and bought apps like Byju's, etc., which purely teach you study hacking, right? In good old days, they were the most likely questions which are going to come in for your examinations. You prepare for those, you wrote study, and you pass. And I have students telling me, sir, I've increased my percentage from 60% to 80%, but I don't understand the principles of engineering. And I'm like, okay, so what happens when you join Google? Will you last? I think parents and teachers need to realize this. Percentage is futile, it's useless. So please take this message back home to all the teachers that you work with, all the parents that you are related with, that focus on learning. Don't just focus on studying and not understanding the principles of what you're learning. That's one. Secondly, I think, dignity is non-negotiable. For all the wealth, for all the power in the world. And while most people appear in the 100 most powerful list of Time magazine or the 100 most influential list of Fortune magazine and whatever, and I've failed to understand during the pandemic how they think they are powerful when they're sitting powerlessly at home, while it is the labor which is out there ensuring that all the daily needs and necessities reach us. So they are the powerful ones, not you. You're just in the list. You're not powerful at all. Never forget that. And I think this is a very important message to all those people who love being in those lists. You are not powerful. You are not influential. You are just fooling yourself. Never forget that. You are sitting powerlessly at home right now doing Zoom calls like all of us. It's the labor out there who is serving us. It's the truck drivers, the grocers, the janitors who have kept your fancy condominiums clean, your fancy apartment blocks clean. It's the security guards who kept you safe. It's the truck drivers who ensured that your groceries reach you. So learn to respect them. That's what equal and same respect means. And this entire thing, because several people in the audience have been speaking about, because we raised this thing about Catherine and how the UN, declared her as persona non grata. There's another recent movie called Backstabbing for Beginners. This is Michael Susan, who blew the whistle on the Oil for Food program by the so famous, or should I call him infamous, Kofi Annan, right? And it was a big scam. And if you want to see how places like Iraq and Afghanistan were actually destroyed and who has to be held accountable, I think the UN, besides the US, has to be held accountable, besides the US and the UK, with all due respect to my British friend, Mark Parkinson. These are countries which have messed up the world. The UN is responsible. We need to hold them accountable. We need to own responsibility. So watch this movie called Backstabbing for Backstabbing for Beginners. It's by Michael Susan, who's written this a book of the by the same name in 2008. It's a complete expose, and he blew the whistle on the Oil for Food program, the UN Oil for Food program. So I think we need to look at the world more deeply and understand what's really happening in the world, and are we walking the talk out there? And all your stories remind me of a story. There's this huge education institution. It's a group of institutions in India. I won't name them. And their founder and promoter has a Interpol red corner alert on him.
Begins with A?
Sorry?
Begins with A?
Yeah, it begins with A. And yeah,
well,
okay.
well.
You know what it is, yeah.
No prizes for guessing, Mark.
Right.
No.
And it's not about the promoter of this institute. It's about a lieutenant general who was working with this organization, who I happen to know around 15 years ago. I was doing a short stint with the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office. I was chosen by them to lead something called the Public Diplomacy Initiative. The Public Diplomacy Initiative is basically where you promote everything which is non-tourism, like business, trade and investment, education. So you promote that country as the #1 choice for education, environment, creative arts, etc. So that's how they chose me to lead that. And I was reporting to the FCO, and which is in London. And we had £2 million to launch the event with Tony Blair's visit to India. And I just happened to discuss this with this Lieutenant General, who happened to be a director in this group of institutions, educational institutions. Now, I told him that he offered to sponsor because we needed another £3 million or so. And he said, we will underwrite it, ensure that Tony Blair comes to our institution. And I said, sir, I don't think we'll be able to work with your institution because we are only working with British institutions, right? Now, that was not true because I just didn't want to offend him and tell him that there's something wrong with your organization. Anyway, this man goes and discusses the concept of the Public Diplomacy Initiative with his chairman, and chairman offers to underwrite the entire £3 million. And he calls me and he says, Jerry, done, we are ready to sponsor it. I said, but sir, I told you that we cannot work with non-British organizations, so I can't work with you. But now, Jerry, I've spoken to chairman has committed, I will lose face. So I said, what I can do for you, just because you're a dear friend, is I can come and explain to your chairman that General Saab has made a commitment to you, but we can't work with you because we have taken a policy decision to work with only British organizations. And before doing that, I met with this man, the Lieutenant General, and I gave him an entire Interpol report where it was highlighted why there's an Interpol red corner alert against this man. And the general turns around and it says to me, Jerry, this is all envy. I said, the Interpol is envious of your chairman? Stop it. I mean, don't do this to me, right? Don't insult my intelligence. I said, I'm coming over to meet your chairman only to help you to save face. So, but please don't insult my intelligence. Now I go to meet the chairman on a particular day in 2005, along with another colleague of mine. There's General Saab sitting right next to me. There's the chairman's chair over there. There's my colleague from the British High Commission who's sitting on the other side, along with another colleague of the general. And we are waiting. The chairman doesn't come in for over an hour. And I had another appointment, so I told the general that I am going to leave because I have another appointment in the next 15 minutes at an adjoining place. So he says, no, wait for him. I think he's coming in the next 2 minutes. Anyway, 2 minutes pass, 5 minutes pass. The chairman does not come in. In walks his son. His son walks in and sits on the chair. And as he sits on the chair, the general stands up. And the general is standing like this. The story is about the general, not about the crooked promoters. And I died 1 million deaths here. I died 1 million deaths. I said, what is this man doing? How can he do this? It's not about him. It's about the entire Indian army. You just compromise the entire Indian army. And I have family members who are in the army, and I said, this is not done. And I remember as I left that place after telling the chairman's son that I have another appointment. So my colleague is going to explain to you why exactly we won't be working with you. As I left that place, I sent him a message on the mobile phone, and I said, Hati mara bhi to saw lakka. It's an old Indian saying, which means even if the elephant is dead, he's worth 100 lakhs, is worth $1 billion, right? I increased the price. The original saying is 7 lakhs, but I said with inflation, it's around 100 lakhs. And he felt offended with this, with the message. But later on, he realized that I was right and he resigned the job. So dignity is non-negotiable. You negotiate and compromise dignity, your self-esteem will always be shallow. It will never be solid. So that's a great, that's an insight that I wanted to share with all of you in the audience and everybody. And I move to my final question for all of you, which is, trust and respect, by now we've established, are inspired, are earned, and it's not an entitlement. You don't inherit it. So how can people sustain, enhance, and restore their trust quotient? Because a lot of people have lost their trust. And studies and research of trust shows you that you can restore your trust also. So any insights from all of you? 1 minute each.
Alphabetical?
Okay, alphabetical. We'll start with Michael since he's been at the receiving end.
Yeah, I'm always at the receiving end. Very bad, you.
It's the company and the tech you choose.
Absolutely.
Stop using Apple.
Rubbish. It's so easy to use.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
I think when you start to learn, like I said earlier, when you start to say no, and when you're able to walk away from a situation rather than create a battle or something, but when you walk away from a situation where your integrity is being compromised and people come to know of it, is when they start trusting you a lot more. If they see you succumbing to it, then they kind of, here's a guy who's wishy-washy. But the ability to walk away is when people start trusting you more.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. And over to Itu.
I believe that, trust means that you're ready to risk whatever you have. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we at Rex, Karam, we talk about not just talks, ideas for action. So you have to walk your talk. You have to act. You have to do the karma. Karma means action. You have to act and lead. The third thing is feedback. You got to be open for feedback. It could be good, bad, ugly. And I would stress on ugly, because if you're ready to take the ugly feedback as well, that will help you to trust yourself, and it will bring in trust from others around you. And the third thing that is very, very important is accept your vulnerability. Accept who you are. The minute you accept that you are vulnerable, you are human, you could be wrong, you could do things that are not great, that is the moment when others try to relate, others relate to you, synchronize with you, resonate with you, and align with you to take things forward, because then you are nobody sitting on a pedestal. You are one with the one you need to walk with. And that's the way to make the world a better place. I keep stressing on that, because you have to walk with the not so savory to get the savory. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Itu. Okay, Abraham.
Very quickly, 1 minute. So I think
I'm playing favorites now, Mark. I've saved you for the last.
So very quickly, I think begetting trust involves doing the right thing, even if the person who's in front of you is going to get the short end of the stick, and it may end up this person in such a way that this person doesn't like you, but they can still trust you and respect you. So I think that's very important. If you're looking at making everyone like you and trust you and respect you, I think it's very difficult. You may get people to trust and respect you. It may not necessarily mean that they will all like you.
Thank you, Abraham. And that's a great insight. People can dislike you, but they would still trust you because there's something trustworthy about you. Excellent. Thank you, sir. Aditi. Aditi
Well,
ma'am,
for me, I think
Mark, I told you, you're going to pay for your sins.
you get what you give, as simple as that. So if you give respect and trust, I think you get it right back. And
Right.
again, as an educator, it's very, very important for me to trust and respect the students in my school to in order to get it back from them, with parents also. So you've talked about those difficult situations, where the so-called chief guest hasn't arrived. I've just gone ahead with the function because the parents are there. I have no business being late, waiting for someone who doesn't respect their time. It's been a very
Absolutely.
tough decision. I was put on the dock for maybe a couple of hours, but then I made them understand that you have 600 parents waiting, that the children are waiting in the wings. They will not wait indefinitely. A time was given months ago. So these are tough decisions which you take, which unknowingly, I didn't do it to get trust or respect. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Like you said, it seemed right that I'm not making 600 people wait. And I want to give you an award, Jerry, for waiting for 1 hour for the said person. I really admire you for that, because I think knowing you would have walked out in the first 10 minutes that you're not there, you don't respect my time, tata, bye bye, I'm going. So that, for me, that's the thing. You mirror what you get. That's it.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with that. Only when you extend trust and respect will it come back to you. But most people can't extend trust and respect because they don't have the self-trust, right? And they're very insecure and very immature. It takes a lot of security to be trustworthy and extend trust. Thank you. And last but not the least, the best for the last, like they say. Right, Mark? That is what it does.
Thank you, Jerry.
Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, I think a number of the speakers have been talking about, and it's really resonated with me. And I think it's something that always has. Leadership isn't a popularity competition. We don't step up into leadership roles because we want people to like us, or because we think we deserve to be liked or loved or whatever else. And those who do tend to be fragile and vulnerable leaders, and frequently leaders who are too easily tempted down the wrong paths. There's another really interesting aspect to me, and that is the way as leaders, we don't only owe it to our people to be trustworthy and have high integrity in terms of our own actions, but that we owe it to our team members that we don't ask them to work alongside people who act in ways which are untrustworthy or low in integrity. And that can sometimes be the harder one. You can be looking after your own house, you're keeping your own house clean, but somewhere if you're allowing or making allowances for team members who are not doing likewise, then that brings into question within the whole team your willingness to make the hard decisions when you need to. And it can get even more interesting, of course, if it's within a company where, let's say, it's the person who breaks the sales records every year. The guy who his sales performance for the company is phenomenal. But if, for example, he's a Me Too event waiting to happen in the office because he's an ogre and a misogynist and behaves badly towards the female staff in the place, or is disrespectful and those sorts of things, then are you still prepared to make to take the hard decisions? Ultimately, it all, to me, in some ways, ties a lot to the old concept that Stephen Covey was very keen on about, the emotional bank account, because again, that is about relationships. But that however much we may feel it's unjustifiable and it's unfair and it's not reasonable, it is what it is. And that is that this is an account into which you can make tiny deposits over a long period of time. And you seek to make those tiny deposits little bit by little bit by little bit. And sometimes you might think, oh, that was a big act on my part. That should have been worth a big deposit. Why do people only see it as a little deposit? But tough luck, that's just the way it is. And yet this is a very vulnerable and precarious account, because one act on your part which is wrong, one act which goes against the flow of the trustworthy image that you wanted to present, we'll see a massive withdrawal from the account. And it will take you a very, very long time to replenish the account and to start again. and you're only ever going to get to replenish it with those little tiny deposits. So it's a tough call. It is tough. But ultimately, I think we have to set all of this in the context of a world where, through much more available information, wrongdoing, I personally believe, is getting harder and harder on a big scale to do in the world, because the likelihood of getting caught, the likelihood of people coming to know gets greater. I'm thoroughly with Steven Pinker that we actually live in the best of worlds that's ever existed. And yes, it's far from perfect, but it is better than it's ever been before. And I think that there's a great deal of opportunity now for us to know what are the agenda points on which we need to work to make it even better. But ultimately, it's a better world than it was.
So thank you, Mark. See, I saved you for the end because you took more time than 1 minute, right? Okay, so thank you, Mark. But those were some great insights over there. And to start with what Mark discussed about restoring trust, we are all human beings. We make mistakes. And I think the first step towards restoring trust is about owning that we made a mistake, and then about making those deposits, which are actions, not words. It's, you can only work yourself back into trust, back into being trustworthy by your deeds, not by your words. So that's the first thing about restoring trust. First, you own it, and to own it, you need to get feedback. So great leaders who are secure and mature seek, celebrate, and value feedback, right? You don't just take feedback from people who are higher up than you. You take feedback from your direct reports. You take feedback from people who report to you, from teachers who report to you, even from the children who you teach, like Aditi ma'am spoke about. So even as parents, are you taking feedback from your children? Like I always say, feedback is the multivitamin of champions for continuous improvement. If you're not doing that, there are very high chances of you getting derailed somewhere along the way. So that's how you restore trust, by seeking feedback for continuous improvement, because we are all human beings. So we all make mistakes, and to err is human, but to seek forgiveness by doing what is right and by acknowledging you've done something wrong is divine. It's not to forgive is divine, right? And then, of course, how do you sustain and how do you enhance trust? Simply by walking the talk, like Michael said, and doing the right thing, and getting things done in the right way. It's not about getting things done. The messaging of many people in the corporate sector, in the education sector, in the UN sector, in all organizations and institutions around the world is get it done by hook or crook. No, that's wrong. Right? It's not get it done by hook or crook, because you'll get instant results, but you are also negatively impacting the sustainability of your organization, of your institution, of your teams, and even of the self. So you get things done in the right way. It's about doing the right thing. And when you extend trust, you will get trust. So that's how you sustain and enhance trust. Keep extending trust, and keep being trustworthy and building on your own trustworthiness. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you, Aditi ma'am. Thank you, Itu. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Mark, for all the insights. Brilliant session. I think people in the audience have also really enjoyed it. A lot of them have resonated their thoughts, which are in synergy with all the thoughts that all of you have shared. Thank you so much, and pleasure moderating this panel with all of you. Learned a lot from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And have a rest
Thank
of the
you.
Sunday. Have a good rest of the Sunday. Have a great rest of the Sunday.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Jerry.
Thank
It was
you.
a
And thank
lovely
you, Tyra and
conversation.
Golden Door, for giving us all the opportunity to share our thoughts on the Golden Door Awards platform. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
You too. Take care. All the best. See you. Bye-bye.